Good morning. It's time to up the smartphone photography game. So our phones are super powerful tools for taking high quality content, even if they're, a slightly older model, like my poor beat up thing is. You can get some really awesome content for your brand or just for yourself, for your own enjoyment, kids, family, whatever you want to take pictures and videos of. We're going to go through some of the ways that I streamline the process, tips and tricks to take better photos and videos, as well as the editing tools that are available to use right on your phone and make really high quality content for your brand or for your life, for your own documenting your life journey, whichever you want to do. First, I'm going to get my screen share up. There we go. Everything's a little sleepy this morning. Awesome. So you are attending the smartphone photography and videography class by Bad Axe Enterprises. That's me, I'm Carolyn. Today we're gonna go over design basics, photography and videography basics, editing basics, and then the apps and tools that I use to get really high quality images and videos off of a phone. It doesn't matter if you have an Android, iOS, iPhone, whatever you're using, these tips will apply to all. We are going to be looking at an Android operating system. The demos are done with my phone, which is a Google Pixel 3a, but I kind of kept them a little bit general so that you can see some of the functions that are going to work across the board, no matter what type of a device you're using. That's me, Carolyn, who you know already, but I've been doing this since 2015, and I've definitely been taking photos a lot longer than that, photos and videos. I am by no means an expert photographer, but I consider myself to be pretty good at making high quality content with the tools that I have available. So that's what you're going to learn today, not some sort of Nat Geo level photo documentation type style, but the accessible, action-based, like, how can I start improving my photography today? To start, we're going to go over design basics. So these are some things that are going to help you take better images and create more balanced designs that are more appealing to the human eye. The ways that we do that is we combine kind of all of these different design tenets and apply them to taking images. So the first one is the rule of thirds. The second one is balance. The third one is the golden ratio. And then the fourth tenet is less is more. Okay, let me click, there we go. So in this image, you can see I've divided it up. This is a really good example of how the rule of thirds can make a really powerful, balanced, and enjoyable to look at image. You see the grass in the foreground is approximately about a third of the image. The mountains and hills fading into the distance is another third. And then the clouds in the sky is the final third. So this is divided up. You could divide up your image either way, vertically or horizontally, like here, even diagonally to make thirds. You will see some settings on your phone of how to put guides on, and we're going to look at that in a little bit, to have this so you can kind of see as you're taking an image how to align stuff to make it kind of this pleasing breakup of three. This is about balance, splitting an image in a way that creates either a balance or a kind of a tension between two spaces. So in this image, we've got on the right side a lot of negative space. It's solid, it's dark. On the left side, it's positive space. So there's an item there, there's the mountainside. It's got a lot of texture with the snow and the rocks, and it's light colored. So you can see how in this image, it's split between two things, and that creates like an interesting tension, makes it visually appealing, and it's almost like mirrored. It's almost kind of like a yin yang symbol because it has two different spaces that are creating a different effect, which draws your eye obviously straight to the mountainside, and you're checking that out, and it lets it stand out on its own. This is the golden ratio. This gets super nerdy. So this is the Fibonacci sequence. If you watched the Da Vinci Code back in the 2000s, whenever that came out, or read the book by Dan Brown, this is discussed in there as being some sort of secret code in artwork. It's not really necessarily a secret code so much as it is nature's sequence. There are so many things that in nature exemplify this natural progression of numbers. So the Fibonacci sequence is the sum of the two previous numbers. So as you see over there on the left, it's 1, 1, 2, 3, that goes on and on and on. And this number actually is exemplified in, let me click, things like the Nautilus, how the chambers of the chambered Nautilus grows is in approximately the golden ratio spiral. So for us, a lot of things we're seeing around us in nature, whether it's pine cones or different plants growing out, how their leaf structure works, or things like the inside of a chambered Nautilus, we are actually seeing the golden ratio a lot, and we don't even really realize it. So when it's applied to design, photography, things like that, it becomes, the image then becomes in our mind pleasing and balanced. And you can see here too how the hierarchy of the areas inside these different chambers grows as well. So like down there, I don't know if you can read it, it's 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on. So growing with that spiral, those little subsections, just like the sequence. And this can be really useful. A lot of designers use this in logo making or font design, things like that, but it applies to photos as well. So in that, I will show you a setting on my phone where I can put the golden ratio overlay on like my camera, like as I'm live taking pictures. It's especially important for portraiture. It's useful, I should say. It's not something you need to adhere to like by law. No one's going to come find you. But it creates naturally balanced images. There are a lot of different techniques for doing portraiture or including people like from headshot kind of level, where you can overlay the golden ratio and make sure like it's very pleasing the way the head is tipped or the way the person is situated within the frame. And sometimes if you combine the golden ratio and the rule of thirds and a sense of balance and simplicity, you're going to get an image that's very not only pleasing to look at, but poignant and memorable. Can you say more with less? Think about what your reason is for taking your images. Who are you going to show it to? Who are you going to talk to? What do they need to know? And how simply can you tell them? And what is the essence of what you want to capture? Taking photos for fun, obviously you don't need to put as much thought into it. But taking things for your brand, it can really help when you're like, okay, what emotion do I want to convey? How simply can I convey it? What will the lighting do to contribute to that emotion? What will the setting do to contribute to that takeaway? What will any of the props, the background, the way I framed it, am I lower, am I higher than the thing I'm taking a picture of? Knowing why you want to collect the images or the video will help you determine the methods for doing it and also help you kind of pare back. I know many times when I'm doing like product photography for clients or working with a photographer and I'm doing like kind of the creative design side, we will start like if we're doing a flat lay, right? Like we've got products, we've got props, everybody's seen those pictures and they're taken from above at a complete parallel to the items that are flat on a surface. A lot of times, we'll start with an entire table full of props and we'll start putting stuff in and moving things around and, take a few shots and move more stuff around. So often the best images end up being the ones where we've really pared back, been a little bit more simple and told the story with fewer items because we're really dialed into what we want to say. Usually we start with like 80 million things. And it's like, okay, is this a picture about the spoon? Is this a picture about that cup? Is it about the cheese? Like what is this picture actually about? And, in going back and like revisiting and simplifying and making sure that image is really supportive of like, oh no, this is about these really cool heirloom spoons that this company creates. It's very obvious that they are highlighting those, or it's very obvious that they are the main character of this story. So don't be afraid to take stuff out and see how simply you can tell a story. I'm like a maximalist in everything. But photos, it's something that is really useful and a useful exercise to pare back and see and really challenge yourself to see how simply can I evoke the mood that I want? How quickly can I get people to visually the point I want them to get, being like, oh, these are high quality, or oh, these are really unique, or this is funky, or that's funny. How quickly can you get people there? So these are the quick tips that are going to almost instantly make you a better photographer. Clean your lens. They get disgusting. Like you can see, mine is really gross. Anyways, your front facing camera also, like if you're taking pictures that way, selfies or video recording yourself where you want to see yourself in frame, clean your lens. And like it's not even a big investment. You probably have some freebie promo ones at home. Like scrub with a microfiber cloth. Like obviously we've all done it where we've just used our shirt or something like that. Just use a real lens cloth. I mean, like I know for me, like I have, there's like 10 in there. Clean it, take some time. It's amazing how even like visually, like if you're like, oh yeah, my lens is clean, like you do a quick check, you're like, there's no lint on it, or it's not gunked up with gummy bears or something like that. That has happened. But you clean it, even though it looks clean, and then you take a picture and you're like, oh, it's a lot better. You can always add a nasty filter later to make your photos look dirty, which irritates me. That's a pet peeve. That's personal aesthetic choice. The next tip, hold still, breathe in, and as you're slowly exhaling, you can take your shot and it will be even steadier. This tip actually did come from Nat Geo. Photographers who are taking pictures of things that they have to be very still, like whether it's wildlife or something in nature, where the subject either is only going to be there for a second and they have to like really prep themselves for a shot, or if they're in an unstable position, when you take the breath in and then as you're exhaling, your hand is going to be the most steady as you're slowly exhaling. Because breathing in, no matter what you do, you are going to move your arms a tiny bit. So if you're taking a photo on the in breath, it's kind of like photo yoga. Your hand will be the most steadiest as you exhale slowly. So take the shot then. Obviously, having a tripod will help and stabilize. If you can put your arms on a table or a tree branch or wherever you are, or on the ground, and take the picture with your hands resting on something sturdy, that'll help too. If you want to get really crazy and invest in a phone gimbal, that's a whole separate thing. But right now we're talking about with what you have, what can you do? So that exhale, take the photo, that is the best method for in-hand stabilization. Drink less coffee, it's another one, but that's personal choice. And take a few shots. You'll be amazed how much this happens, where I commit, I'm like, this is the angle. This is how I want to take the picture. This is going to be the best. And then I'm like, well, let's just try one more just for fun. Yeah, that one more just for fun usually ends up being the one that's good. Take several shots, take burst mode images if it's a subject that's moving, where it takes several in quick succession, because you never really know what interesting things are going to happen with framing if you try something else. So take more photos than you think. You can always clean them out and delete them later. But a lot of times, for me at least, I end up really happy with pictures that I've taken after I got what I thought was the best, like you have in mind. And I'm like, this first picture I'm going to take, winner, perfect. It's usually not. That could be a me thing, but try new things. Adjust your light balance on your phone for different looks. This is achieved. Let's see if I can even demonstrate it. So here you see when I click, not that, I can adjust, there it is, the light balance. So I can drag it and make my image darker, make my image lighter. All phones will have this setting. Usually you tap on the screen a couple times to get it. Another thing that's really helpful is if you get your shot framed and you're like, I really want it to stay focused on that teacup, you can hold and press on your screen to lock focus on an object. On iOS, I believe it's the same. So like on iPhones, you hold and long press and then the little lock icon will come up that your autofocus is locked right where you pressed. This is so helpful for subjects that are going to sit still. It is not helpful for things that are about to move. A lot of phones will allow you to adjust the focus sensitivity. We're going to look at some of those settings in a little bit, but that's something that used to be very frustrating to me. I would take a picture and I'd take another one right after, and it's a still object. And the second one would be blurry because it had focused on something over here automatically instead of on the object I had set right in front of it. So you can lock your focus if you're going to be taking a lot of images from that setup point. So like where you're holding your phone or where it's on the tripod and the object is still, lock your focus once you get it set. And if your subject allows it, try different angles. One of my favorite things to do is to take a picture, especially of a person. I like to take pictures of people, sitting like kind of like as if like from the height, like a person sitting near them would be looking at them. So it feels like very personal, and then have the person stay in that same position. And then I take one from above, kind of over and behind. That feels so much more like, you're personable when you're like at eye level, you're like having a chat, very connect, like you can easily make a connection from that image. Above, you feel, as the viewer of the image, you feel a little more like omnipotent, like you're catching them. It's a little more your fly on the wall kind of vibe. And then I like to take the same setup. So a person, like, we'll just say they're sitting in a chair. We're chatting, we're spying on them. And then I like to get really, really low and take what's called a hero shot, where they look larger than life. And that gives like a sense of power and importance. Like when you're taking a picture from lower, you get a lot of foreshortening. So the part that's closest to you, like their legs or the side of their thigh or whatever, will look larger, like not in a bad way always too. Like it'll be like that's the closest part to you and the rest is very elongated. I love taking pictures like that, especially if like you have the subject in one seated position or standing position and you try all three of those. From that one setup, that one image, you're going to have three very different moods without even moving the person. Just the photographer kind of moves around. And so, if you're thinking about marketing, those three images for a person who has like a personal brand, they could all be used for very different things. They all evoke very different moods, and they all create like a very different viewer experience, right? So like, straight on looking at each other, that's very conversational. That content would feel very much like you're connecting with somebody, they're being vulnerable or something like that. Spying on someone can be a little bit more like behind the scenes. It's maybe a little bit more uncomfortable for the viewer, a little bit more active too. Like, okay, I'm actively creeping on this person. Kind of like easier to create like a behind the scenes vibe, or like, hey, you're checking in on me, this is what's happening. And then the hero shot can be like, without sounding super negative, there are a lot of ways to make it a very enjoyable experience for the viewer too, but like, it's powerful, it's commanding, it's intense. and you can play with those emotions and attention grabbing as well, because it's a person seated or standing or doing something typical, but then you're picking an angle that's evokes a very different emotion than just like, oh yeah, it's a picture of a person sitting, like, oh, I should pay attention, they're commanding my attention. So these are tools I use to take and edit excellent shots. Canva, GIMP, my tripod, a light box, and CapCut. These are just like from the very base level what I'm using. There are a couple other things that I use as like the next level for phone photography that are not, I would say they're not required for you to take good pictures, but we'll go through them. So Canva, really, like if it's edited for social media use, I've done it in Canva 9 million times out of 10. This presentation was done in Canva. There are pre-sized templates for social media platforms, stock images, icons, videos, many export types, preloaded fonts. So if you're editing your images or your videos into graphics and you want to use, stickers, text, overlay, colors, and things like that, Canva is a really great tool for it. I don't necessarily like it that much for video editing, and that is purely personal preference. I know a lot of designers and video takers really, really love Canva's video editing tools. Personally, I find them, because I haven't played with them, I find them a little bit confusing. I know they've updated them recently, and that's great. I really have not invested the time in learning about them. I use Canva pretty much only for photos. I will drop a video into a template, even a video I've taken, but I will pre-edit that video in another software that we're going to talk about in a second. I don't, like, if I want like to chop something out of a video or add something into it or combine a few clips, like I am not doing that in Canva. It's just not what I've learned to do. But everything else, I pay for the pro features on Canva, but the free account offers a ton of really, really great tools. Highly recommend it if you're going to be doing any sort of like putting things into graphics or Pinterest pins or templates or header images or anything with text or stickers or your brand logo, things like that. Canva is the fastest option for editing and the most user-friendly. If I'm doing color correct, Harmony might recognize these. If I'm doing color correct or doing any sort of intense photo editing, like if I want to take and do like a color pop or change the values of a color, you can do some of that stuff in Canva. Like you can adjust saturation and hue and add a couple filters and things like that. It's not bad. It's just very, very basic. If I'm doing almost any editing at all, it's going to be done in GIMP first. And GIMP is a desktop-based editing software, 100% free, with a really active community for like support and help and tutorials. It's really similar in function to Adobe Photoshop. So if you're looking for a comparable, and you're like me and you hate Adobe, GIMP is the best for that. It's amazing, available on Mac or Windows. It's raster based, not vector. So what does that mean? It utilizes pixels to manipulate an image versus mathematical points. So you can get any pixel based file type off of GIMP. So if you need an Adobe Illustrator file, or an EPS file or some vector-based file, you cannot export from GIMP into those. It says there are some options too, but now that they don't work, they don't produce a true vector because it's a raster-based like Photoshop. You're using pixels to manipulate your image. So what that means is your image size is bound by pixel standards. So if you import an image, that's at a certain resolution, that's the maximum resolution you'll get out of it when you export it, if that makes sense. So I have used GIMP to design everything from print materials to adjusting the colors of an image. It's also really good for getting accurate file compressions, which is important if you're posting on social media. There's a maximum file size you can upload, like image quality to any social media platform. You can't import your largest and most enormous file. There's limits on what you can import. I use GIMP to make sure if I have a really high quality image that I want to post, I make sure that the specs are as close to the max for Instagram or Facebook or whatever with GIMP, and compressing the file to that size and trying to retain as much of the quality. That's a little bit extra. Most of the time you can compress with Canva too, if you need a smaller image size, things like that. I'm not saying like smaller dimensionally, I'm saying smaller quality, like smaller resolution, same dimensions, so that you can post it for social. That's actually probably like the number one thing I use GIMP for anymore, is compressing images with accuracy. My tripod, this is the exact tripod that I use. It's really beat up now. I love it. It comes with like a Bluetooth clicker that you can set up like a self timer and sync it with that clicker and like have it in your hand to take selfies. I loved using that. I lost the remote. Relatable life. I know vaguely where it is, but I haven't used the Bluetooth like remote shutter in quite a while because I lost it. But when I did use it, it was really handy. It was pretty easy to set up and I liked using it, but a lot of times I will just set a timer on my phone if I'm taking pictures of myself. But this tripod's really nice because it's flexy, it bends around, it holds onto stuff. So you can get really great images. I use it most of the time for videos now. So if I'm recording like my YouTube shorts or reels or things like that, I set this up on my desk and record. And then when I'm editing, I'll chop off that first little bit where it's like my finger leaving the screen and me getting set up to talk or whatever. But super useful, very affordable, and it's flat light compatible. So you can like take pictures from straight above. It's super short. So I haven't found that to be very useful, but some people super care about that. This is the teeny tiny light box that I use. It's really, really small. I like how many like light color settings it has. And I got a super small one because I needed it for a couple product shots I was doing, and it needed to be super transportable, and the products weren't very big. I then had my husband build one, it's huge. So I have my light box, which is this one, and it's got like a little ring light in the top, but you can actually open the top and take pictures from straight down, which is neat. We can kind of do the side and the front on pictures. You plug it into a wall or USB, change the light settings, whatever. But I had my husband build one that is 2 feet cubed, and like that's huge. And we painted it matte black, and that one I use for like obviously items that are larger, but it creates such an intense black effect that it almost like it's not a light box, it's a black box. It's like space. It's like a vortex of darkness, which for some images works really great. If I'm using it for something lighter, obviously I drape it with white fabric, but the black still shows through no matter what, because it's got that intense saturation, which is really great. So this is something that's super easy to DIY. You don't need to be as insane as me and have it built out of thick plywood. So mine lives in the closet in my office, and it's very heavy and difficult to transport. So I really only use it here at the office and have client products brought here to take pictures. I took it on site once to the building that was next door to my office, and that was heavy and annoying to take. But you can easily build one out of foam core paper, like the paper-backed foam board for like presentations you get at the dollar store or Walmart or wherever. Cut to the size you want, and then cut another piece that you just hold, and you can use that as a light diffuser and like set up your three-sided. So like how this one has kind of 5-ish sides, I would build one where it doesn't have a top and it doesn't have this wall. So it's just the back wall, side wall, and bottom. That's how my big black box is. And then have this side facing a window with natural light. And then you can use the diffuser from standing over here, kind of hold it up while you're taking a picture, your phone's on a tripod, and get really good like shadow reduction, things like that. This is so easy to DIY and has really good results. I've seen other people use like shower board, which you can get at Menards or like any home improvement store. I've seen people use that to create like a white box like this. My issue with that is it is a little shiny, but for some people that's the effect they want. There's tons of contact papers you can get to create fake surfaces that you can slide in, like high resolution, like marble or tile or fake wood, things like that, which will give you like a huge variety if you're doing product shots of replicatable conditions to take your images in, which you can take on your phone, which is super awesome. All right, CapCut, this is for videos. So with videos, you're probably going to have to edit no matter what, right? There are some times where you take an image and you just have to crop it for social posts. Videos, often you're going to be doing some level of editing too. This is the video editor that I am completely obsessed with. It's super easy to learn. It has a huge library of stock videos, which if you need to like supplement your existing videos that you've taken, it's a great, great, great option. It's so easy to edit text, which is a big thing for me. I get really frustrated with like creating reels and TikTok videos in either Instagram or TikTok. I don't know why. I find the text, like adding text to the video interface, really confusing on both. I've used both, but I don't like it. On CapCut, it's really easy. You can also use auto captions. So if you're speaking in your video or you do a voiceover, you can caption that automatically and go in and edit if there's any misprints. You can add voiceovers. There's a new feature on CapCut that I haven't tried yet, but you can connect your TikTok account and use TikTok sounds while you're editing. I'm not quite sure how well that will work. I'm assuming it will be really, really useful for people who have access to the full library of TikTok sounds. For me, like my business account, TikTok discovered that I was a business account. So the sounds, I can only use commercially approved sounds, which is not ideal. But my personal account where I just play around on TikTok, I can use all the trending sounds, the pop music, things like that. So I'm curious, I haven't tried it out yet with CapCut integrating with TikTok to get the sounds, but I'm curious about that. So there's a huge library existing in CapCut of music that you can add to your videos. It's available on iOS and Android. I'm obsessed with it. I love it. It's easy to figure out, and it has the option to do some really, really advanced projects, some really complex functions. My favorite features are adding the text and music and implementing voiceovers and auto captioning. Those are the things I use in almost all of my images or my videos, sorry. And we'll look at this. I have a screen demo of using CapCut that will go through and break down some of the different features of CapCut itself, and you can kind of see what a super brief editing process looks like. So let's do some demos. I would also first, before we look at the demos, like to talk a little bit about video creation. We're still like looking at the time, way ahead. That's awesome. So these demos, after that, we can open up for some Q&A, and I can do further demos where we look at different editing styles or different things that I've done on past videos or photos, and we can talk about how some of those effects are achieved. But about taking videos, when you're shooting video, make sure that as you're shooting, you have stabilization. So a tripod is definitely much more important, or a stack of books. We've all been there. Something to hold your phone steady as you take videos. And similar to photos, taking multiple angles for a video can be useful. So if you're doing product videography, showcase the product from a variety of angles. You know, maybe you're holding it, maybe it's laying on something else that kind of gives people a sense of what it would be used for. Maybe then it's, you know, kind of in use, things like that. I'm kind of thinking about Harmony's product specifically for this one. Like, it's very easy, you know, you take a little video of the products just kind of sitting there being cute with other stuff around them, but how can you continue to build the story? So like, she has some stuff that's very specific to like baby care, you know, showing off, like snuggling with a baby, like, you know, kind of thinking about some of those things, like what is the mood you want to build. Also for videos, don't be afraid to write a shot list. That is something that helps me a lot and helps me stay focused on what I want to not only say, but to show. So how to figure out a shot list goes back to setting those goals of like, what do you want your video to achieve? Basically, you know, who is this for? What do you want to showcase? From that, you then start going in and thinking, okay, I want to show off how warm these new socks are. So I'm going to walk through the snow, and then I'm going to come in and put the socks on, and then I'm going to have a cup of tea, and I'm going to like snuggle and have all those little clips that build this kind of vignette of like, oh yeah, I bet those socks are super warm. Those look really warm. You know, what other images are supportive of the goal of your video? Like, do you need to use some stock images? Do you need to create at several different locations? And it doesn't have to be super complex list of like shots and storyboarded out, but just so you have an idea when you're setting out to take video of what you want to capture. That's going to help you immensely. I'm speaking mostly to myself because so many times have I been like, yeah, I'll record this and then this and then this. And then I'm like, yep, and that'll be a 7-second video. And it's like, it's so bloated with random ideas that I'm like, the plot is lost. Like, this is not cohesive. So demos, let's open those up. Okay, we will start with photos. And right. So this is a screen recording from my phone, and we're going to go through some of the settings that will be pretty universal, some that might be unique just to the Google Pixel. But for the most part, we're going to look at stuff that is useful for any phone. So your basic camera interface, you have the ability to set a level. And as you're setting a level, you can see how tipped you are in the image. We talked about the brightness slider. You can lock this as well or reset it. There are always flash settings as well. Top shot is something that's unique to, I believe. So top shot is like basically like a burst mode for my phone. Taking a full image is always advised because this is something that I've seen some people do that I'm like, okay, what if you want to use the image for something else? So example, taking pictures that are, you have the option to go into the ratio settings here and say, oh, I just want to take a square image. I'm like, okay, what if you want to make a Pinterest pin and you just have that square and you're like, oh gosh, I really wish I had more. to play with. Take the biggest image you can, like ratio wise, because the better you get at framing a shot within that, that is easy to crop to different sizes, the more useful your image becomes. Where, you know, a square image you can maybe only use on a few social platforms, and then you're confined to adding it to a template, things like that. If you're good at framing a shot where, you know, like your dog or whatever you're taking a picture of is somewhat centered, kind of using that rule of thirds again, the top and bottom third can then be cropped, or it can be used because you have this really balanced image that is easier to work with in a variety of settings. So then we're going to go into more settings. Here are some basic ones. Camera sounds I've turned off because they're annoying to me. Saving your location. This can be useful sometimes for some people, like if you're shooting at many locations and you're not going to remember them. For me, I'm like, I don't see the benefit. I don't want that. It doesn't really add anything to my camera taking experience. Google Lens suggestions. So this is for like QR codes or scanning documents, things like that. I have that on because every now and then I scan a QR code. Social share, that's just your share options, like where you can auto share your image after you take it. You can click on it and do a quick share type thing. Gestures, so this is kind of an accessibility option. So when you tap on the screen certain ways, or sometimes there's like, you can make motions. And if your thing is set up like on a self timer or a motion sensitive image capture, and you can go like this and this, and like it'll take a selfie a second after you put your hand down. I don't use those functions that much, but they are definitely something that for a lot of people are really useful accessibility wise. You know, if there's some sort of physical limitations to how a person can interact with the screen of their phone, super, super important and useful. I go in and play with these settings every now and then if I discover that like I need my camera to open as fast as it can. And if I am like, okay, I'm having lag with it, this is usually something I test right when I get a new phone. So I make sure that I know how to quick open. So for this phone, I couldn't figure out how to set it for a really long time, but it is to quick open. The button on the side, it's a fast double tap, and it just automatically opens that camera, which that is so important for me if I'm capturing funny things my kids are doing for my own use, because you know they're going to be done in a second. Or wildlife, like we will see in the CapCut video, animals running across the road, things like that. Because I have a lot of security settings on my device, so my lock screen isn't really what I would consider a rapid unlock experience. By design, I want it to be more complicated to get into, but being able to get that camera open super fast is important for me for the way I create content. More specifically for myself than for like any brand or anything like that. But all those settings are under here. Device storage and storage saver. This is where you're going to see the type of image capture that you're getting. So what size is the max size output for photo and video? That will be in like some sort of storage or quality settings. Under advanced here, I believe I opened that up later in the video. We'll see some of the advanced settings that you can mess with to create even more customized photography options, which is, I love playing with them. Sometimes I'm like, I have no idea what this does. Let's find out. That's the best way to learn. Framing hints I have on, and then grid type, go back. That was, yeah, there's the advanced settings. So framing hints, like the leveler, and then focus tips. So these pop up every now and then, like if I'm too close to a subject, it'll say move back. Focus tips I don't really appreciate or utilize, but I really do like the leveler. So I leave this setting on because I like to see like how, like you saw in the beginning of it, it was saying like 1%, 0%, like how close to the horizon am I? and which direction am I tipping? Because a lot of times to me, I'll take an image and I think it looks straight. And then later when I'm editing it, I'm like, oh, it's so crooked. So the leveler helps me a lot. Grid type, I have no grid on right now. Later in this video, I'll go through and show the different grid options. Your phone might have even more or less than what I have. But basically, like that rule of thirds that we talked about, that's almost always a grid option. There's a few other ones, like on mine, I have the golden ratio overlay, which I've used sometimes, usually when I'm taking pictures of people on my phone, like a setup of people, not just like casually like taking a selfie with friends. Like when I'm like, okay, we need to capture this image of this, more portrait type stuff. And exposure allows you to adjust the brightness and shadows like we were doing on that slider. So now in the advanced settings, I hate dirty lenses. I'm like, if I want it to look dirty, I'll add a nasty filter later. So this warning will pop up if my lens is too dirty. Usually I'm a freak about it and clean it with a cloth or whatever clothing I'm wearing before I try to take shots. But it's important. High def resolution control. When this setting is off, high def stays on all the time. I want that. This is also really, really cool. I have not enabled this setting, but you can take raw JPEGs on my phone, which is really neat because you have even more flexibility with editing when you take raw images. Typically, this is done on like a nicer camera and things like that, but I believe this era of Pixel was the first of the Google phones that allowed you to split the raw. So you have like your general JPEG image, which is typically what photos are shot in, that you've worked with it. You've seen JPEGs. And then you have a separate raw file. So that raw file, the JPEG exists. It's a final image. That's great. You can still edit it, play with it. But the raw file, there's so much more that you can manipulate in a program like Photoshop or Lightroom or GIMP. You can go in with raw files and change so many more things more minutely. I still typically do edit in JPEG, but the fact that I can shoot in RAW on my phone, it's not something I've played with yet, but knowing that I have that option, if I were to do a huge, like a product photo shoot for a client and used only my phone, I would definitely turn this on and then have the raw files also available to them. So it's also great, like if you're like, okay, I'm going to take pictures, but I want somebody else to edit them, you'd give your editor a lot more options if they had the raw and the JPEG. This is for storage of videos. If you're running out of storage space on your device, you can do this. I never do because I want the MP4, which is the more typical, easier to utilize video file. So these are the advanced options that are available for my phone. There will be some different ones for every different phone. Like you may or may not have the ability to switch if you want raw files. Also, you may or may not be able to choose that you're going to do HVAC, whatever it is, HEVC for your videos. These are some pretty robust options for storing and editing videos. Not necessary for the day-to-day content creation, but useful to have. Skip ahead. Okay. Oops. No, go back. Pause. All right. So grid types, these rule of thirds, 3x3. So that would be 9 boxes on your screen, 4x4. Obviously would be 16 boxes on your screen. And then the golden ratio. This is another grid type that overlays onto your image capturing experience. So I did the golden ratio, and you can see how this isn't divided up into equal size boxes. You see this one is double of that one's double of this is the, like, okay, so you're kind of seeing how like this splits it up as the Fibonacci, and you would see how that spiral would fit in there to create that. I love shooting with the golden ratio overlay on. I don't always, but it's really nice to have the option to shoot with this just because it allows so much different framing. I've switched into portrait mode now, and I switched to the back camera. Portrait mode is it's an effect, really. So it takes and recognizes the foreground subject, whether that's a person, a flower, an animal, a tree, and it blurs the background at a certain rate. I don't have the ability to go in and change a lot of my portrait mode settings on this phone, which is fine. I like taking it. It sharpens some of the images qualities, like the foreground images qualities, but you don't. So what will happen to me a lot of times, because my hair is lighter colored, it will blur part of my hair out. And it's kind of an automatic setting. If it works great, it's great. If it gets wonky, it's wonky. I don't dislike it, and I use it a lot. So now I've taken an image, it's processing, and you'll see how it changes. You see how the background's a little bit blurred out, and I can go in and edit right here. So this is called the native editor on your phone. This just lives right in your photo settings. You can usually access it right through your camera. And it has a lot of, most phones will have a lot of like very automatic type things, like switching it into a black and white portrait, just doing an auto enhance, like just do what you think is best, phone, and edit this for me. There's suggestions where it'll make auto suggestions for things to tweak. And then there's a lot of manual things that you can go in and do. So tools, things that I can mess with there, contrast, I can change that, make it high contrast. White point is neat. Okay, so white point pulls the whitest point of the image. So it takes the group of pixels that create the most white, and it ups the rest of the whites in the image, the lightest places, to match that level. So it's a way to increase luminosity of highlights, right? So this can be really useful for product shots. It's also useful to lower if you're like, okay, these highlights are too insane. You can also do that through here. You see where the cursor is hovering and glowing on the screen, it says highlights and shadows. And those are two other ways, like if you're using a light box and you end up with some really contrasty shadows, this is another way to lighten those or lessen the effects of those. The one that I'm about to show you though is black point. So black point, like white point, pulls the darkest areas of the image and creates kind of like a sum average of those dark spots and pulls the darkness out of other areas that are darker in the image. That sounds like I didn't say words there. Basically, it takes the deepest shadow and then it takes all the rest of the other shadows and tries to bring them, the lighter shadows, towards the average of the darkest shadow. So it's not like it's going to posterize everything and just like make everything like flat shadow all the way black. It takes the average of dark shadows and pulls the other ones to that. So you can see it working really well in portraits that are set. I find it being the most useful to edit in portraits that are set in nature. So like where there's a person and there's natural elements. I don't usually, especially in my office specifically, because I have fluorescent lights, I don't see it working as well in indoor spaces, just because the shadows are much more manufactured. It sounds weird, but because it's not natural lighting and inside, there's not a lot of natural elements, the shadows that are created by nature and by natural elements, because of a bunch of sciencey light things, actually create more complex shadows. So when you are outside and in nature, and you're taking pictures, black point becomes a lot more fun to play with. And you'll see it if you try it, like if you take a picture that you took outside and mess with your black point and white point settings in your editor, you'll see what I mean. It creates a lot more richness, a lot more intensity, and it's, I don't know, I find it like a much more interesting experience of editing. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, that was it for the photos part. With this, the thing that I would definitely suggest is to know your modes that you can shoot in. So I showed you portrait mode. This over here where it's kind of cut off on the screen says night sight. Night sight is really, really neat because for me, it makes my shutter time longer. So you have a longer time that the lens is open taking the image. So right, on a normal camera setting, pretty much you click a button, it takes a picture. For night sight, you click a button and you hold very still. This is where tripod comes in low light, like in the dark. And it takes the image over a couple seconds. And the length of time that it takes the image varies because it's trying to get it up to a certain amount of ambient light. So it's trying to have the shutter stay open long enough that it's capturing X amount of ambient light so that the image ends up visible. I've done this setting on many different pictures that I've taken around our farm at night. It always blows my mind because I'm like always amazed what good images it creates. I'm trying to find an example of one because I know I just took some a couple days ago. So with that setting, it can be really, really useful to play with. Other ones that are really cool are like time lapse for video, setting it up in a spot where like there's a lot of activity happening or not a lot of activity happening, but you want to capture stuff over a long period. Okay, here we go. This will be a good example. So here you can see this is a video of a fire outside at night that I took a couple days ago. Right, you see how dark it is. It was pitch black out besides the fire. So when I took photos of it on night sight mode, so it was pitch black, like the sky was not that blue. But because the shutter stayed open longer, it collected more ambient light, that like more than your eyes are perceiving instantly, right? So that shutter stayed open for, it was probably about 3 seconds instead of the instantaneous like millisecond of like taking the picture, getting all the light it needs in like that short amount of time. This stayed open for about 3 seconds, collected all the ambient light, the light from the fire, stuff that was residual in the sky that we can't really perceive with our eyes as well, and created an image that's like, I could not see the chicken coop from where I was sitting, but you could see it after I took the picture. So that's a fun thing to play with. Obviously, you have to be very sturdy. I actually did I sat down and set it on my boot and just held really still. Time lapse for videos is really neat. I like to use it not just to showcase a really busy area where there's people or activity or things happening, things like that. Or our chickens running around. Time lapse is fun for that. I also like to show slow changes over time. So playing with time lapse to do things like the sky, how the sky changes over 10 minutes or something like that. Where is the video? Okay. So this is a 12-second long video, and you can barely tell, but the clouds are moving. And this is taken over 15 minutes. Let me see it a little bit. Yeah. So that's something that I enjoy doing to show things that are, maybe I've done a sunset, a couple different sunsets, things like that. So that's a really neat setting that would be under video. There's, time lapse. And then on this phone particularly, there's only a few different video settings, right? So there's like time lapse, normal speed, several different like gradations of how long the time lapse will last. Obviously your zoom settings, like zoom in as you see here on the camera, you can do further zoom by pinching or squeezing in to back up. But it doesn't offer a ton of different native video settings. Like a lot of the effects that I create besides time lapse, I create in editing. So that's an after thing. I just have it set up so that it takes the best possible videos and then I create any other effect that I want through editing. So speaking of editing, let's go look at that. Now, switch over to this one. Okay, so this, we are gonna look at CapCut. This is my favorite video editing app. We're gonna break down why. I'm a huge nerd for it. Other apps that I use that I really enjoy for video editing, InShot is another one that I've used. It's also free, has a lot of really similar functions. It's kind of funny because I love CapCut a lot. I really like using it. I reach for it most often. And my sister really likes using InShot. They're really similar functions, and we both have really similar editing styles. So I always find that interesting that like for her, she's like, it just makes more sense. I'm like, okay, you know, they're really, really similar. There's a few like menu differences and a very few little functional differences. Initially, CapCut was the only one that could do auto captions from your spoken word. And I believe InShot now has that ability. I don't use it as much, so I'm not actually sure if it does or not. It's something that I could easily check on too. But I love CapCut, so I don't switch over. Other ones that I've heard good things about that I'm going to download and try are VN. One of the reasons that I want to try VN is because there is a limitation within CapCut of if you want to trim your clips, you can shorten them just to whole decimal point second lengths. So with like 1.5 seconds, right? Not 1.51. And in VN, you can do 1.51 so that you get 2 decimal points of control of how long your clips are, which surprisingly comes up more often than you'd think when you're setting images or video lengths to music, like for making a reel or a TikTok. There's a lot of times where I'm like, well, that doesn't just line up exactly perfectly with the beat of the song or the sound effect or whatever. So having that additional decimal point of control for clip length, that's really the only feature I've seen or heard about from VN that I'm like, oh, I need that app. It's another free one. A lot of people really like it. I have never used it, but I know of that feature and I will be downloading it purely because of that feature. But CapCut, this is the main editing screen. When you start a new project, it opens up your videos on your camera roll and you get to select from whatever videos you want. Then there's also the option to add photos, which I like a lot. You just add both. You just keep clicking these little boxes. You can go through and add both. And you can also go in and look through their stock video library. Great, like super helpful to supplement. If you're like, I need a video of the ocean. I do not live by the ocean. Something like that. It comes in super handy, and their stock video library is pretty big. There've been a couple times where I haven't found exactly what I wanted. And in those cases, I go to Canva. They have a huge stock video library. And I just create a document that's at the size I want. So if it's a ratio for TikTok or YouTube or whatever, I create a Canva document that's that size. I search their stock videos. I just drop it in. I don't edit at all. And then I download it and then I edit in CapCut. Like I just upload it here. It would show up on my camera rolls videos and just add it to the project there if the stock video library isn't giving me what I need. So for this one, I selected a dorky video of some deer running across our road while we were driving. And we're going to look at mostly the functions that I think most people would utilize for their projects, which is we're going to look at text and how to add text in that process and how to kind of jazz it up a little. And then we're also going to look at some video effects. I did not do the voiceovers that I normally do, and I did not do auto captions in this, but you will see where to do both of those things. So here, got the main video. As you're watching it, you can scroll across. It comes included with an ending. So sliding back and forth that editor, you can cut it, you can trim your clip, you can add more clips to it, but adding text is the thing that I probably do the most. So type out whatever you want, hit check, and you see now I can position it on the screen on the video. I can adjust the length of how long I want that text to show up. And then I can go in and make it cute with a bunch of different things, like adding an animation where it just kind of bounces around and it's a looping animation, or changing the font. There are a ton of fonts included in CapCut, and I believe you can upload your own. I've never needed to, just because I have my own font that actually showed up in CapCut's library. The font that I use for my brand is the Babus family, and that is in CapCut. I chose well, I guess, on fonts. It's usually included in most editing, so that's really nice. There's a lot of different font options. I can pretty strongly guarantee you'll find something close to on brand for you, if not exactly on brand. A little bit about this screen here where we're editing this clip or this text. You can split the text into two separate little individual recording items. So like if I were to split this here, I would have one little sticker that says traffic jam and this one that says traffic jam again, and I can move it around. You can change your style. That was where I was looking for the font and things like that. Tracking, where you see over here on the right, this is a really neat feature that if you have an image that's moving across the screen and you want the text to stay on that image, you can set tracking so that the text follows that image directly on it, things like that. That's a pretty advanced function for a free phone editing app. I have used tracking a couple times. I like it a lot. It's really neat. And I think utilizing it in more of my content will be in the future, but it's not always an effect that I reach for as far as text goes. So now if I'm like, okay, I want to add some effects, this is still within the basic editing menu down here at the bottom. So you can change the speed of your video. This is another way to create kind of a time-lapse effect. If you record it at regular speed on your phone, and then you're like, I want to speed this clip up, it's taking too long, or just a portion of the clip, you would just split. This is split right here. So you chop your clip, take the section that you want to speed up, highlight it, and then add speed to it here. And there's a whole slider of different ability for how fast you want your content to become. Animation is like for zoom ins, for pans, like if you want to slide across in a video clip, things like that. Delete, obviously delete. Background remover is pretty neat too if you want to do a green screen effect. I don't find that it's as functional as using an actual green screen, but it's still a pretty useful tool if you're like, okay, I want to get rid of the background of this. Like you're like, I don't want that guy. Get rid of it. You can use that. So as I scroll through and look for something that's in a separate menu, you can see that there's a lot of like really specific functionalities here. All right, there we go. Effects. These are video effects that are preloaded within CapCut, and you can apply them to your video and adjust how strongly they appear on your video. For this one, you see, I recorded it this morning. I got my calendar reminder to show up to this. For this video, you can use any of these, and you can actually use combinations of them. So you can layer many of these video effects on top of each other to get something really unique. A lot of the ones that I like are over here in the retro section, because they create different retro film effects, like giving you kind of a graininess or whatever. And you can drag the length of time that you want that effect to show up. Let's see where you see that. So here you see the video effect is in purple. It says main video, and then the title of the effect, film frame 2. You can stretch that out so it applies to that whole video, or you can shorten it so it's just one clip. Other things that are really neat in CapCut are going in and editing the color of your image, or your video. You can change the white balance. You can basically create your own custom filter. You can stabilize, you can tip, so that like if you took the video like this and you're like, I want it straightened, you can kind of crop and straighten and do edits that way. Whether you're adding like massive cinematic effects or you're just kind of brightening, cleaning up, making it look better, you're going to have functionality within this. There's tons of other features for super complex edits, like adding a keyframe. Keyframes are where you basically bookmark a point in your video that other things reference. It's kind of like they're a little bit more complicated of a function, not totally unusable, but it's for longer format videos. It's really useful to be able to have a keyframe, because you set a keyframe and you can create a looping effect or an animation effect or other things without having to cut your video and create it just for a clip. So a keyframe basically will tell your editing software where an effect or a transition or different events start and stop. Adding music is also really, really useful. Opening up the music library, there's a ton of different genres and songs and weird stuff, cool stuff, basically any type of music you can think of, it's there. You can rip audio off of other videos. So if you're like, oh, I really liked the sound of the wind blowing through the trees that I took on this video, but I want to put that sound over me working at my office for whatever reason, you can go into the audio settings on CapCut, extract audio from video. It'll open up your camera roll again. You select whatever video has the audio you like, and it'll just pull the audio file off of that, which is amazing. I have used it to like screen record on my phone and collect audio from clips of songs, which is a little naughty. Different people talking, different videos that I'm like, we want the words from it or we want the audio from it for a client, but we don't want the video itself. So some of those were like testimonials, right? So where a client got a video testimonial of like, I love this product, I use it every day, but their video wasn't great, or it was just them talking. And like, we want to showcase the product and like make it really beautiful and wonderful video of the product with the customer's vocal testimonial over it. That's something that's very easy to achieve within CapCut, which I am super into. I like easy to achieve. All right, get some of these exited out. Back to our presentation. I don't think there's that much left here. Doesn't look like it. We're going to be into question time in a second. Yeah. Do you guys have any questions? You can unmute or you can type in chat if it's loud where you are. The upcoming workshops that I've got, the next one is in March. It's Social Media 101 for Business, where we're going to break down all the different platforms, demographics that are on those platforms, types of content that are on those platforms, and kind of go into what makes sense for you. where does your brand need to be to achieve their goals? What platforms are worth the effort for you and your style of creating content? I know one of you knows about this, but the other one maybe would be interested. Attending future workshops for free. Biz Club members get to do that and watch all past recordings like this one. And then if you want to contact me, there's the contact info. Yay. All right. If you have any questions, I would love to hear them.
I do.
Awesome.
I looked at your tripod and I'm trying to find the link of something else that someone told me about. It was kind of almost like this arm sort of thing that you can attach to, say, like your countertop, because I do a lot of photos in my kitchen, or sometimes trying to take videos that are a little more flat lay, or I want to be able to be using both of my hands.
Gotcha.
And, you know, if I'm making a recipe or product or something. And so, where is it? I was wondering if the tripod would be better. It's called, gooseneck mount, something like that.
I would say no, the tripod would not be better. A gooseneck mount is going to give you more height, usually, depending on the size of one you get. I would say be wary about any that like have a clip on the bottom. I'm looking at some on Amazon right now. You're
My
gonna
sister sent me the one she used. I could message you and you could let me know.
Yeah. The only thing I would say is be aware, because I've had this experience with like a magnifying light that I was going to use on a counter. Measure the lip of your counter, like how deep is it? Because anything that you're like, I need it to bend over, right?
Yes.
Like you need it to bend over pretty far. Like you're not going to have it just straight from that counter. You're going to, even though a phone's not that heavy, if that clip isn't able to get enough bite on the edge of your counter, or if your countertops are beveled at all, it's not going to work well.
Right.
Another option, there's some tripods that like, you know, they'll set small and they're telescoping on top, and they have an arm that comes out that you can do over. I will look up some links for those too and email them to you as I find them, because those are super useful for doing flat lays or doing demos with your hands. And there's a lot of artists I know that use them and love them.
I can send you the link to the one that I use if you're interested, because I do a lot of flat lay. And I have tried the gooseneck one and I almost broke my phone once, actually, because it wasn't in the right spot and it didn't grab enough. And it was just bad. It was horrible. I was like freaking out. Thank goodness I had a good case, because it was like, it made a really loud sound and I was like freaking out that I crashed my screen. So, but I have one, it actually is really short and you can use it just on the table, or you can actually, mine actually goes tall enough that I can actually go from the floor all the way up over my counter and do like cooking, like over my counter.
Yeah, do like, if you have that link and you want to throw it in the chat, I'll include that in the follow-up email from this session and the session notes.
Okay, let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, or just you can message it to me later too. That's super
okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any other questions? Man, I am amazed. Like when I tested this workshop, for some reason, I took a lot longer. I don't know if I rushed through parts that you want to revisit.
I may have questions when I've really only used the Reels app to make videos so far, and it's very limiting where, you know, you add clips and you can't go back and readjust the length later. So if you get down the line and then you're like, oh, I want this one clip longer, you're kind of stuck. And so I definitely need to learn, and just in my typical hesitancy of new technology, haven't, you know, gotten there yet. But I downloaded while you were doing it, the CapCut. So
yeah. Well, and I have a lot of experience with using CapCut, not just like, I've just logged a lot of hours in it. So if there's questions that you have, let me know, because I probably ran into the same or similar frustration.
I don't know if Jen has a question, but I do have one more, or I can pause if she's got one.
No, I'm okay. I kind of missed half of it. So I have to go back and rewatch it.
Yeah, no problem. You'll have the recording. I'll probably have it up by Monday. It takes a while to process, and I'm lazy.
No worries.
All right.
So my other question is about the flat lays and props.
Mhm.
So, well, just in general, I was thinking about you have the three, you had those options as rules. But I think I've observed that flat lays tend to not follow a rule like that unless maybe they're using that golden ratio, and I didn't know that. And then for a magazine that I've started writing for, they like a lot of props in the back and on the sides, and we've been having difficulty in that, in figuring out how to create those scenes, like the social media scene, not like the photography rules viewpoint, but the that like what people more do as homespun, or I don't know, I'm not finding the correct adjective.
Yeah, like visual storytelling. So,
Yes.
with those photos that you're saying, like, they have more props and stuff like that, they likely are still using some sort of design rule. And those aren't things that need to be like 100% of the time stuck to. They're a really good starting point if you're like, I want to make sure this image is balanced. I want to make sure visual interest pulls to the actual focus of the reason why you're taking a picture. So for magazine and editorial image type stuff, again, especially if it's kind of more homespun and like lifestyle, think about what, again, you're building, like what vibe are you creating? Is it a very clean? Is it modern? Is it more antique? Is it vintage? And start, is it warmer? Does it feel warm, like more textural? And just kind of make like almost an abstract of like, what are these things? What are objects that are associated with them? So I had to do this recently for what I considered kind of a ethereal concept. I wanted to showcase this independent bridal company that does these funky dresses that are amazing. I wanted to showcase those dresses, but also showcase a location that we were shooting in. And the whole thing was supposed to be like getting ready the night before a wedding, but not just focused on the wedding, more focused on the relationships of the people with the space and with each other, which in my mind, I'm like, that is like really complex to me.
Yes.
So what I did was I made a list of like, okay, how do I want those people, these models I'm working with, how do I want them to be feeling the night before this? They're excited, they're nostalgic, they're happy, they're with their friends. So, like I'm making this list of like actual emotions. And then I'm like, okay, well, what would visual representations of those be? So like laughing was one, a photo album was another, like makeup out, getting ready, doing each other's hair like sisters, or things like that. So then that started to inform the props, right, that came in. So like, we had a photo album, we had a huge stack of like magazines and hair products and things like that that were in the background of one of the bathroom shots. We had like goofy things too, like the girls putting flower crowns on each other, like being silly and laughing. And those sorts of things informed the backstory without being like, for this photo shoot, we thought that they were all BFFs and like, whatever. Like it came through because they're sitting on a bed looking at a photo album together. You can tell like they're laughing and nostalgic. And so some of those props can like fill in visual story gaps, and then the image is filled more. From the flat lay perspective, I would say still try to stick to the golden ratio, the rule of thirds, initially, just because some of those can get so busy, right? And then you're not sure what the focus is. For some of the stuff that you do, your elements can be very obviously like, okay, this is not the focus. So like natural materials, right?
Mm.
Like those are easy to incorporate in a way that people are like, okay, whether it's the product that's more the focus because it's surrounded by natural materials versus like, oh, there's also a teacup, there's a tablecloth, there's like physical items. It's like, okay, what is this about? I guess kind of like differentiating like props that are very obviously not the thing, and then still supporting the vision of what you're creating.
Yes, I think that's where I totally get that story you were telling, and it's very thoughtful and actually also seems overwhelming to go through that process for every photo.
Yes. Oh, yes.
But I can see how it's really impactful, an impactful process. Especially for this magazine specifically, I've tried to study the issues that I have. So, my sister helps me. And so you just look through and you're like, well, this item is not relevant to what they're doing, and so like recently we were doing a beard oil and it's like, well, I can't use any shaving props because this is the opposite.
Beard, yeah.
And, and I don't have a beard brush and I don't want to spend so much money for every photo, to like collect these props that then I don't, and so I was just like trying to figure out then what's just that, like you were saying, the vibe setting and ethereal feel that you just kind of want people to get from this photo when really you only care about them looking at the bottle of beard oil and everything else is just like makes you feel good in the background.
Yeah. And like for something like that, for like a beard oil focus where you're like, obviously like shaving stuff doesn't work, right? So, maybe it's like nice textiles that are a little bit more rough spun, but still obviously high quality. So something like linen that has a lot of visual interest and drape. Pocket knives, like immediately, like when you're talking about it, I'm like, well, some of these things, like for me, like my dad has a huge beard. So like, okay, like what would I associate with my dad? That would be something that is easy enough to put in the background that's like very obvious that that's not what you're selling. So I have a set of like wood handled knives that were from him that I'm like, that could easily be in the background. Even some plants, like, dried of the different ingredients that you're using of it, like bundled and tied with something basic twine that's still, kind of evocative of the masculine, but with that a little bit more gentler side that your products are associated with. A hand mirror, setting stuff on a mirror creates like visual depth and interest.
Yeah.
And like if the edges of the mirror are very feminine, it would be easy enough to kind of like put some sort of fabric around it to kind of hide parts of it. Yeah. And it's tricky. It's not easy, like getting images that are visually interesting enough, but pared down enough. Like it's such a difficult one. I mean, like other things I think of too, weirdly, for like, okay, the men in my life, like it's a lot of outdoors stuff. It's like a lot of camping and in the woods stuff. I'm trying to think too. I don't know, you got me thinking about options.
Well, some of the challenges, she comes to visit. And so we're trying to do 5 photo shoots in one time. So then we're just, like, what do we have? Just trying to bang it out. And that's why I'm trying to also learn some more skills. So then I could do things also on my own and at a gentler pace.
And too, like the ideation, I find that like the coming up with the ideas simultaneously takes longer and saves time.
Right.
It takes a long time for me, like, right, like in that wedding example, that was a lot of work, and that was over a week of several different days where I dedicated time and like really sat down and thought about it and did research and like made a mood board and just kind of in my head, just like really like a lot of thinking about like what I wanted it to say visually. But then once that happened, like once I came up with really the storyline and like the goal of it, of like what it needs to showcase, then afterwards the shot list came super fast. And then at the photo shoot, we were so efficient. Like we had 3 photographers there, like around this location in different spots. The models all knew what to do. The designer was there on site helping with the dresses, and like we all were just like having fun, but like knew exactly what images we were getting. So, you know, if this is something that you set aside some time to think about and brainstorm in advance of your sister coming, even if there's like no like planned date for her next visit, you could just kind of have a back like stash of a few different photo shoot like creative directions and then a short shot list that you could be like, okay, she's coming to visit. This winter one is not going to work, but this one I had for spring, the flowers are going to be blooming then. This would be awesome. And I have 5 more ideas.
Right. Yeah, and part of the trouble is, especially with those magazines, is I'm always right. Yeah, we were just shooting for fall, and recently we were doing summer. You know, so it's quite often when the garden isn't going. But that's a really good takeaway of just instead of trying to do it in the moment, you know, and find that inspiration as you're like in the work. Which is more typical of me to plan. And I was trying to be more creative, but really I need to plan.
Yeah. And that's something too, that like, I think people often kind of write that off as, oh, that's not creativity. You're planning it out and manufacturing it. I'm like, no, it's way more creative because we're ending up with what we need. Like it's actually useful. And, you know, sometimes in the moment, like if you have a plan of shots and then while you're doing it, inspiration strikes and a different direction gets taken, that's awesome. If you have no plan, you're not even going to end up with those shots. And then inspiration doesn't strike and then everybody's frustrated. So, you know, for me, I'm like, it's a fail safe. You still welcome flexibility and inspiration in the moment. Like, because we had that happen at that shoot I was talking about. We had 3 different things that like were on the shot list that didn't happen, but something better happened because I asked, you know, the photographers and models had seen the shot list. They were familiar with it. When we got there and they saw the space, which most of them had already been there, but when they saw it again, like ready for the event, they were like, oh, for this shot, what if we did this? And it was way better than the original plan. But if they had not had that original plan, they would have no idea about me even wanting that shot. So like, I mean, you're obviously not working with models, but it can be something where you can be more collaborative when there's at least a foundation.
Yes, I think it just gets things flowing.
Yep.
So then you're already in the zone instead of trying to get in the zone when you're trying to actually be doing the work.
Yep. And that's like, I mean, I've been on many different photo shoots where that's the case, where everybody shows up and they're like, well, these are the things that we have. I'm like, what are we doing here? You know, like there's just like a heap of stuff, right? And it's like, what's your idea? I'm like, I can't do this right now. I'm not ready to come up with ideas. I thought we had them. So that's, yes. And it's funny too, because like the more you collect ideas, the more ideas you get. Like it's not just like oh, I'll wait till they show up. It's like you forcefully go get ideas, and then the more better ideas come to you. That's why Pinterest is so great for this. Like it's a really good starting point for stuff, because a lot of times like I'll make a mood board for a photo shoot or a video shoot, and there will be, you know, very talented people that have done very excellent photo shoots, and I'll be like, okay, this vibe, this lighting, this thing, or ooh, what if we did that instead? And it creates like so much, like having that, again, that foundation piece for inspiration. It just makes it so much easier to build. Well, any other questions? Things you want to see? Thoughts? thoughts? Otherwise, we can cut loose. Well, I appreciate you both being here.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day. This recording will be up in an email to you, Harmony, and then in the club for replay, Jen, probably by Monday, I would say. If you have questions between now and then or later, based on the information that you got today, or other thoughts or things you'd like help with or want resources for, let me know. I would love to point you in the right direction for anything.
Sounds good. Thank you. Oh, I was able to find a tripod almost exactly the same as mine. So I put that in the chat as
Perfect.
well.
I
Thank
just copied it, so I will send that along with the additional notes in the email or in the club when it goes up, when the video goes up.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.